Hey everybody, Who's Your Jedi here with another review for you. This time I'm talking about episode 22 of season 1 of Arrow. No, it is not the season finale. We get one more episode after this, and a good thing because there's just so many balls in the air, so much going on, and it's really, really good and cool. Um, this is another really good episode of the series, and I had so much fun watching it. Anyway, let's get right into it. So let's take care of our little nods to the DC universe first. We get another mention of Judge Grell, and this is, of course, this character I believe has been mentioned before. And this is, of course, a nod to the famous Green Lantern, Green Arrow artist Mike Grell, who, of course, is plenty of just normal Green Arrow work under his belt, if I remember right. And the big one, though, is that we get to see a mention of Ferris Aircraft. This is, of course, the airline company, the air company that belongs to Carol Ferris from the Green Lantern comics. Hal Jordan, Green Lantern, well, one of them anyway, worked for Ferris Air. So, some really cool stuff like that. And this is not the first nod to Green Lantern we've gotten in the show. Oliver did in the other episode mention Coast City, Hal Jordan's hometown. So, as somebody who really loves Green Lantern, I'm totally thrilled about that. Let me see here. Yes, of course. We also have the previously mentioned Brian Markov. Of course, here he's an older gentleman, middle-aged fella, and a scientist. Where in the comics, of course, he's the superhero Geoforce. But I don't really make a whole lot of bones worrying about stuff like that because one, Geoforce has never been the most popular guy in the DC universe. He's not really a character I know terribly well, to be perfectly honest. And frankly, if you really have a bug up your butt over the thing, who's to say that there isn't Brian Markov Jr. running around out there who might not someday take up the mantle should people with superhuman powers ever come to exist in the Arrow universe? I'm taking the same sort of attitude when they mentioned Ted Kord previous episode. Well, who's to say that Ted Kord isn't some, young genius about Oliver's age, or who's to say that in this universe the first Blue Beetle might not be Jaime Reyes? But again, these are all just little details. Let's kind of just sort of start talking about what's going on with the characters, and we'll also, of course, talk about the plot. First of all, I do have to say I really love the title of this episode, "The Darkness on the Edge of Town." It sounds cool, and it sounds like something that would be the title of a story in a comic book. But anyway, so let's get into talking about the characters. And let's start small and work our way up. So let's start with talking about Quentin Lance. Not a whole lot to say about him this time around. The stuff going on around him is mostly plot, but I do like that even he, at this point, is willing to acknowledge that Laurel, that Oliver has changed, that Oliver isn't the guy that Quentin had him pegged as. He has changed. And given the history between those two, that's a real admission from Quentin Lance. Then again, Quentin Lance's idea of repaying Oliver for falsely arresting him on various serious charges was to warn him that dating the daughter of a mobster might be a bad idea. So, gratitude and Quentin still have a lot of work to do. Still, of course, lots of stuff going on the police end of what's going on around Quentin. We see them noting that the Dark Archer is using black arrows and hasn't been seen a while, that his murder of the scientist is really unusual, and then there's, of course, the crime scene guy. He does have an established name, but I can't remember for the life of me what it is. I was reading some of the reactions online, and somebody said that it might have been Kelton, but I don't think that's right. So, because it's fun, I'm just going to keep referring to him as Greg, because that's the name of one of the dudes from CSI, and I like CSI. So, yeah. Whatever his real name is, on these reviews, the crime scene guy is going to always be referred to as Greg. So anyway, apparently Greg has figured out that it's Felicity that's been doing all the hacking over at Merlin Industries. So I have a feeling this is probably going to be a thread that's mostly going to be played out maybe next season. I have a feeling we're not going to be dealing with having a lot of time to really deal with what's going on with Felicity too much next episode. But I'm not terribly worried about this because, you know, she could always say that, like, yeah, somebody stole my ID or was using my computer. I mean, there's 100 ways that they can deal with this and get her out of this. And if he's not alive next season, well, Malcolm Merlyn really would be a perfect patsy for that. Let's see. As long as we're talking about it, let's talk about Felicity. First of all, I love how it's really very obvious that Felicity has more than a little bit of a crush on Oliver, and her, trying to cover up her accidental double ententes. She's about as bad with excuses as Oliver was with reasons why you should do this obviously not what I say thing. So, you gotta admit, those two do have at least something in common. I mean, they're both terrible at making excuses to each other, so I do like that. And of course, we get to see Felicity out in the field again. Goes a little bit better this time, but Felicity is still very much a fish out of water. But she is improving, and I like that scene with her and Dig where she starts pretending to be some one of Tommy's conquests who's mooning over him. I mean, that was some pretty hilarious stuff. And so yeah, let's see here. Let's go on. Not a whole lot to say about Dig this episode, other than the fact that he probably enjoyed it more than a little bit when he got to slap Oliver around during the interrogation with his mom. And that was a great scene. First of all, honestly, when Moira and Oliver went down, I thought at first it was Malcolm. Malcolm was making a move against them for some reason. But of course, it turns out to be part of a plan by Oliver. And again, this reminds us that Oliver can be a seriously cold-blooded SOB when he really wants to, even to people he cares about. I mean, he has gone out and he has pointed that bow at his own mom. Now, of course, he obviously wasn't going to hurt her, but still. I mean, think about the emotional trauma that this is inflicting on poor Moira. On the other hand, when this all comes out in the wash, notice that Moira doesn't bother to say, "Oh, by the way, Oliver, I also kind of had you kidnapped and tortured just after you got back from the island." Hey, and speaking of that, hey, did you notice that Malcolm actually didn't seem all upset that Tommy was assaulted and kidnapped at the same time? Boy, I mean, if you stop and think about that, after all that Malcolm has done that has shown that he does indeed love Tommy, the fact that he was just sort of like, eh. I mean, he didn't even say a word about it. Just shows you how screwed up Malcolm is mentally and where his priorities are. So, not a whole lot else to say about Moira other than, lady, did you really think that Walter was just going to go back to how he was before all of this happened? I mean, seriously, real points to Walter for not putting up with this BS at all. It's like, man, I think it's time for Walter to go back to Australia for a while because there really is no legitimate way. And he even flat out says to Moira, do you really think after what's happened there's anything that you could possibly say that would convince me to stay? And of course, I do like that Malcolm does take a moment to show Thea that he cares about her on the way out. I've already seen people online sort of complaining, when Thea about, going on about her family and how much they suffered, and acting like, she's being a spoiled brat there. Well, you can level spoiled brat as a charge at Thea for a lot of things, and you'd be right. But this one, not so much. I mean, let's stop and think. How many times in the past several months since Oliver turned up alive have people in her family, including her, been attacked, kidnapped, almost murdered? I mean, seriously, that's happened to every single person in her family. People she knows, like Laurel and Tommy, her boyfriend. I mean, everybody. Really, everybody she knows in any real meaningful way on this show has had something like that happen to them, many of them multiple times. So, rich white girl or not, I think Thea's got a perfectly legitimate reason to complain here. It's not been a good year for the Queen family, apart from Oliver turning up being alive. So let's see. Might as well use this opportunity to move over and talk about what's going on with Roy and Thea. And they're not exactly the greatest detectives, but I do like that this is actually realistic because they're just two teenagers. They don't know how to pull stuff like this off. They have no real skills, except, for Roy's perchance for larceny and, low-level felonies. And I like how Thea, to her credit, stands up to Roy when this is all over at the end of it and says, like, you need to choose between the vigilante and me. And, of course, Roy, in an epic fit of poor judgment, chooses his obsession with the vigilante. And I really don't know why Roy thinks this is going to end up with anything other than him getting told to F off. I mean, look at the interaction between him and Oliver. And keep in mind, this is the first time that Oliver, as Oliver, has met Roy. And he flat out says to Roy pretty much what the vigilante would also say. It's like, this guy's a crazy killer, you should stay away. And, like I said, I have a feeling that if this happened in vigilante mode, Oliver would have just told Roy to go F off. So we are teased with the idea that Roy has lost somebody. And, remember, when he first showed up, Roy mentioned that his mom was addicted to vertigo. Now, is that who he's talking about? Well, we haven't seen anybody, either of Roy's parents, or anybody at his house besides him. You gotta wonder, like, who's paying the bills there and handling stuff? I mean, I'm sure that social services is seriously overworked, but, a teenager living by himself, even in the Glades, somebody's going to friggin' notice that. But, it's a mystery. The only thing that I can really think that catches my mind is that it is, in the comics, Roy's father did die when he was pretty young. Of course, his dad was actually basically a forest ranger, a park ranger, who died in a forest fire. So, that could have been changed. It could have been made so that he or his mom was just another victim of all the violence in the Glades, or it could be somebody else. I guess we're just gonna have to wait and see on that one. But still, Roy's done okay. He's not had the real screen time to become as well fleshed out as I really would have liked, but I have a feeling that we will be seeing no shortage of Roy in Season 2, and I think that his character is really going to come into his own because, as we said, we know that Roy's ultimate destiny in the comics is to become, Speedy, Arsenal, and then ultimately Red Arrow. So, yeah. Now, let me see here. Sorry, I'm just looking over my notes trying to think if there's anything else I need to say about those characters. Nope, nothing coming to my mind there. Let's see. Yes, of course. I suppose it's now time to move on to our main characters and the well, let's call a spade a spade. It's everybody is horrible to Tommy for no good reason. Now look, I mean, you can think whatever you want about what Laurel had, who was really in love with who, and when, and why, and where. Honestly, I swear to God, you need a chart to figure this out. I can't say, though, that I'm really 100% happy with what happens in this episode, because to me, more than anything, it just seriously cheapens, one, and this is something I've complained about before, Oliver's relationship with McKenna, and two, even worse, Laurel's relationship with Tommy. I mean, just last episode, she was making this big thing about how she wanted to be with Tommy, and, why are you doing this to me? I love you. And now she's hopping in the sack with Oliver. Now, I like that it is pointed out that Laurel chose to be with Tommy, and it is true that Tommy chose to leave Laurel. So everybody is really making their own choices here, but it's just don't be so damn inconsiderate of each other. I mean, Laurel, Tommy, and Oliver, like before this, are supposed to have been sort of like the Three Musketeers. These people who grew up together, were the closest of friends. Tommy and Laurel and Oliver were indeed boyfriend and girlfriend before everything went to hell. I mean, we even got to see a flashback to that before. I mean, Oliver was obviously not a very good boyfriend, but still, and it's just all this. I mean, I can understand people getting caught up in the heat of the moment. But seriously, look at how consistently, over the course of this season, these two have just not paid one damn real bit of thought as to how Tommy must feel. And also, Laurel, what the heck was with leaving your blinds open during stuff like that? I mean, you got some kind of exhibitionist streak that, you've been keeping from Dad? I mean, poor Tommy, man. Like, everybody just dumps on this poor guy, and Tommy, when this isn't happening, is generally, as I've said, the nicest person on this show. I mean, he's become more of a dick as the season has gone along. True. But look at where he was at the very beginning and towards the middle. He was the nicest guy on the show, and people just everywhere he turned kept being jerks to him for no good reason. And is it just me, and this is something that some people have pointed out online that I saw, that Tommy seems to be sporting more and more of a darker look in terms of his choice of clothing as the season has gone by. And I think this is indeed true. Sort of signaling that Tommy is starting to go down that darker path. And you have to think, if Malcolm doesn't make it out of this season alive, well, who's going to be the person that steps in to take over Merlin Industries? Yeah, it's probably going to be Tommy. And, well, if his dad ends up dead with an arrow in his chest, it's not going to take Tommy too long to figure out who the heck did it. Not that it should take the cops terribly long to figure out who did it, because did you notice that when Oliver broke into the Merlin Industries building in the elevator, he, left the little grappling gun in the elevator shaft that had his fingerprints on it, because no one on the show has the sense to wear gloves. And oh yeah, Felicity, again, not wearing gloves, left her fingerprints all over the keypad at Merlin Industries when she broke into the computer room. Oh, I swear to God. When this show goes off, I'm actually going to have to switch back over to Dexter for my complaint about how cops should have seen through the main characters like that. And you know what? I think this show actually might be worse about this sort of thing than Dexter. No, I take that back. Dexter is totally, totally worse than this show in terms of the cops should have arrested you a long time ago. I love Dexter, but gosh. But then this is TV land, where security cameras and competent crime scene investigators only exist when it's convenient for them to do so. Oh yeah, sorry, I did forget one little nod to the comics. Well, not exactly the comics, but it was a really great nod to, the superhero DC stuff. And again, a very telling remark on the character who said it, and that was when Tommy said, "Why so serious?" And folks, if that ain't a portent as to what Tommy's ultimate and probably dark and very tragic destiny is, yeah. Let me see here. Okay, I think that covers most everything that I had to say, except for the big thing at the end. Oliver, Green Arrow versus the Dark Archer, round 2, and man, this is easily one of the absolute best fights that we have ever seen on this show. I mean, it is just brutal. You have to wonder if the fight coordinators on the show had been watching some of the really great old kung fu flicks, John Woo stuff. Maybe not quite as hardcore as that, because this is TV, you can't quite go that far, but still, that was a painful battle to watch. And just the reaction Oliver had when Malcolm grabbed that arrow, it all crystallizes. And just to up the ante even more, Oliver loses the one-on-one against Malcolm for the second time. I mean, ooh. In most stories, it's the hero fights the villain for the first time, the villain defeats the hero goes off and becomes stronger, and then they have the big showdown, and the hero wins that time. Oliver's 0 for 2, or 2 for 0, or however that you measure that. Malcolm is just more badass than Oliver is, and that is a scary thing to think about when you realize what Oliver's going to be up against next episode. And you know what? That's exactly how it should be. This is, one, just good writing, but this is perfect comic book writing. The hero has been defeated yet again. The villain knows his identity. And I love how Malcolm is actually horrified when he realizes who it is. Because, this is something that if he has to kill Tommy's best friend, even if they are kind of on the outs at the moment, that's going to hurt Tommy bad. As messed up and screwed up as he is, as evil as he is, you can still see in that moment that Malcolm's thinking about Tommy. And you gotta figure, he does probably like Oliver quite a bit too. He's known this kid Oliver his whole life. He's close friends with his dad. Killing Oliver, oh yeah, Malcolm will do it, but he probably won't be super happy about it. But anyway, as I said, this is perfect comic book storytelling. Hero's gone down to the villain, been defeated by the villain for the second time. He's been unmasked. The clock is ticking to the destruction of his city. Thousands of lives are at stake. His best friend is slowly turning against him. Romantic situation, complete chaos. And the hero's stalwart allies are not exactly in a great position to help him. It's beautiful, beautiful stuff. Stuff like that, folks. That's why I love comic books. Because if you were to try and do stuff like this on a regular show, it would just be deemed way too over the top. But since it's a superhero story, you can kind of get away with inching the dial up just that little extra bit more. But anyway, folks, we are in for a treat, I am sure, next week. This episode, really great stuff. So looking forward to the next episode. So thrilled that I decided to review this series. I've been having a blast, despite the occasional lackluster episode. But anyway, I think that's all I have to say this time around. As always, please comment, rate, and subscribe. And of course, you can follow me on Twitter at Who's Your Jedi. Until next time, take care and have a good one.